Well, hey there. How you doing? It's Dr. Simeon Hein with you. Welcome back to my YouTube channel. I thought I'd try a little live event here. It's not something I've done before, but I thought it would be a great way to share with you just some new stuff that I'm involved with at the moment that I thought you'd be interested in. You know, um, back about 15 years ago, I wrote this book, Opening Minds. This is just the bookmark from it, and it was my first look into a lot of these new phenomena that I've been studying ever since, that we talk about here on this channel. And it's a lot of fun, viewing and crop circles and things like subtle energy sciences and resonance and extraterrestrials and topics like that. And one of the things that I didn't count on when I wrote Opening Minds back in 2002 is that a lot of people maybe don't want to open their minds. And I'm hoping you're not one of those people, but they exist. We encounter them. And so I have realized, over the past 15 years or so, that there's a lot of institutions in our society and a lot of folks that don't want to open their minds unless they really had to. And it's kind of created an issue in our society where a certain group of people have experiences a certain portion of the society, and then the rest of the society doesn't want to accept that their experiences are real. And I think you know what I'm talking about, specifically with regard to people that have had contact with unexplained aerial vehicles, unexplained occupants of those vehicles, and other unknown types of phenomena that we know happened to the person or group of people. And it's, where do you talk about such an experience? Where do you go to talk about it? Because for a long time, psychologists have labeled this as a type of, they put it in a spectrum of disorders where if you kind of experience certain things, you kind of get labeled in a derogatory way. And it doesn't really encourage you to talk about it very much, does it? If people are going to think you're weird or if you're labeled in a certain way. I remember this happened at the citizen hearing on disclosure. And in 2013, when I made some videos about that, and some of the reporters, all they could say about the military people, retired military people testifying, that they talked to psychologists and this was some sort of schizotypal disorder. It's just total nonsense. The radars don't have schizotypal disorder, do they? And groups of soldiers and so forth. And they're not mass hallucinations. These are real encounters. Specifically, the citizen hearing, we're looking at groups of retired missile control launch officers that had seen objects come over their launch control facilities and then shut down their missiles. And it happened repeatedly in the 60s and 70s in the so-called northern tier of the United States. Anyway, I thought that I would actually, write a book about it. And so I did. I've been working on this book. I didn't tell you anything about it, but I just thought I'd share it with you. It's just out very recently, and it's my reflection on this exactly what I'm talking to you about. I call it Black Swan Ghosts. Yes, that's it. A sociologist encounters witnesses to unexplained aerial craft, their occupants, and other elements of the multiverse. I know it's a subject that you are really interested in because you subscribe to my channel. But really what this book is about are black swan events, so-called black swan events, rare events, things that are improbable and yet happen sometimes, and yet events that we may not believe are possible or even capable of happening. Events that are so much at the edge of possibility or impossibility that we don't even know how to talk about it. You may be aware of those other books I've mentioned, Black Swan by Nassim Nicholas Taleb, or his newer book, Anti-Fragile, which is also excellent. But the way we think about these rare events, we don't have a good language for describing rare events, things that are way beyond a typical bell curve at the tails, as statisticians refer to them. We don't even have good abilities to estimate when those events are going to happen, their probabilities of happening. And black swan ghost events are even harder to talk about because things that are rare, like floods and economic crashes and disasters, things that don't happen that often. There was a flood here in Boulder in 2013, and Boulder, Colorado, and it really it was like 100-year, 500-year flood. It wasn't supposed to happen again for another 500 years. So rare that no one had ever seen that much rain in a weekend. I was there, and I talk about that in Black Swan Ghost. But that's something we believe could happen, right? That's something that you would imagine sometime could have a huge flood could happen, right? But what we're talking about here are events that our society doesn't even consider to be real. All the witnesses, the citizen hearing. How do we talk about that? Where do we go to talk about it? Well, I think our United States, we're not particularly good at this. Let's be honest about it. There are other societies that are better. Just to give you an example, I know the Chilean military just released a video a couple of days ago as a result of a 2-year study of some objects they encountered 2 years ago that they couldn't explain. They had videos of these objects from their planes and things, and they studied them and said, we don't know what these are. But here they are. They shared them with the public and said, they're honest. We don't know what we don't know. We don't know what this is. We don't even know how to talk about it. And that's what Black Swan Ghost is about. I had to write this book, folks, because after so many years of being involved with remote viewing and these topics, I kept coming across witnesses to these sorts of events. I didn't seek them out. They wanted to talk to me because they knew I was like open-minded. And I kept meeting people like this, and I decided, you know what, I'm going to put their stories in a book, and I've put them all in Black Swan Ghosts. People that saw flying discs while picking huckleberries in northeastern Washington state in the 70s, and then were told to leave the area by the U.S. military. People that had missing time experiences with friends, driving in the mountains at night, and totally inexplicable, loss of function of the cars, and they started again. A policeman in the UK that we met on our crop circle tour a couple of years ago in Wales, who told us that he and his town, they had seen something landing near the golf course, really bright and big. He didn't want to go anywhere near it, and he wasn't on duty at the time, but the next morning coming back, he encountered an 8-foot-high being in a spacesuit, and it jarred him so much he didn't stop. But there were other sightings around the UK that day of related phenomena. Lots of stories like that I've put together, and then tempted to discuss why we don't talk about this as a society. I mean, why are these people so marginalized that they're treated in a kind of like in a negative, disparaging way, and they're not likely to tell us their stories. They're ridiculed by the media, and let's be honest, back in the 50s, our own United States government, the intelligence agencies had an official policy to ridicule this whole subject area because they're afraid that the Soviets could use it in a negative way to, create chaos in the United States, which could be used in a kind of a martial, militaristic way to put us at a disadvantage. But, that was a long time ago, the 1950s. That was 60 years ago. And we need to go beyond that now and actually find out what's going on, because this is an opportunity for us to discover how our universe really works and not just the fairy tales we were taught about it. Some of the witnesses in Black Swan Ghosts, are people that came up and just started talking to me about their father's participation in Roswell, flying wreckage back to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, and the amount of security, massive amounts of security that were around the crates of stuff, even in the plane itself, guarding it from the pilots. These are, deathbed confessions. These are things that people say just before, they leave us because they want us to know the truth. And, in a court of law, a deathbed confession is considered to be real evidence. So we've got a lot of cases like that. We don't have a good way of talking about it. We don't have any official public process for people to talk about this. There's still a very high degree of fear. And I think it's something that we need as a society to talk about and decide how we're going to deal with it, because look, we're dealing with some other advanced technology and other advanced beings that seem to be making contact with us, and yet the whole thing is shrouded in secrecy. As one of the witnesses at the citizens hearing said, David Schindele, who was a missile control launch officer, I believe, at Minot, North Dakota, they were told never to talk again about what they had seen, the ICBMs being shut down by these mysterious glowing red objects flying over the launch control facilities. And they never did talk about it again, not even amongst themselves. He said it was like being embedded in a shell of silence, and it was so uncomfortable. And he kept that silence for 30 years. So I'm wondering how many other people are out there that are embedded in a shell of silence that shouldn't be signed security agreements that probably aren't legal, and they're unnecessarily being silenced when they could be telling us what they know, what they experienced. It doesn't have to be this way. And perhaps you know people who've had experiences like this, who've told you about them. And, it's worth the rest of us hearing what these people have experienced. I know I have. I've just come across people in my life, someone who cleaned my house once, a house cleaner and a massage therapist, both of whom had fathers who had some sort of contact with these unexplained aerial objects, perhaps extraterrestrials. They just talked about it in both cases when they were drunk one night and never mentioned it again. But they were talking about something they'd really experienced. So maybe you know people like this, and maybe you're one of them, or have a family member who's been in the military or something like that. I'm not suggesting that you make them talk about this, but some people want to talk about it, and I think they should. I think we have reached a point where we need to find out what's going on, what sort of universe we live in, what sort of intelligences we're surrounded by, and kind of get beyond this negative cycle of fear around this topic. We just have a huge amount of fear. We don't have to have that. We should have excitement around this topic. I mean, hey, if there are other folks in the universe around us, whether they're from the multiverse, right, in another parallel Earth, or they're from far away, I think we have a right to know what is really going on. I think we have a right to know the truth, and I think you're going to agree. So anyway, I'm telling you about this tonight because I'm going to be on a radio show in a few minutes called Midnight in the Desert with Heather Wade. She's a really great radio host. I was talking with her earlier today. And I just thought I put up some specials on my blog that you could take advantage of for the next couple of days if you see this in time. Okay? And so just want to find out more. As always, feel free to send me comments, but go to blackswanghosts.com, blackswanghosts.com, and you can see everything related to the Black Swan Ghost book. I'm really excited about this book. It's on 2 formats right now. It's on Amazon Kindle, and it's also on something called LeanPub, which is another way to publish books in different formats for iBook and PDF files too. Anyway, if you go to blackswanghosts.com, you'll be able to find out a lot more about it. And as usual, leave me your comments. I'm really curious what you have to say about this. That's really what it's all about. So, well, in any case, thanks a lot for listening, guys. I've enjoyed this. Stay in touch, and we'll talk to you soon. Take care for now, and bye.